Good morning, everyone. Today is day 10 of Make Your Own Sourdough Starter with me. Can you believe we got to day 10 already? So by day 10, your sourdough starter should be doing pretty good. It should be active and bubbly, and by the time it needs to be fed, it should have a sharp tang to it, a sharp smell to it, a little bit of tingle to the nose. By day 10, what you're looking for is for your starter to continue to gain in strength. So at this point, you possibly could make bread, but like a couple days ago when I tested my starter, in the morning it was at the level 2 after 12 hours, and now it's up a little higher. So you can see it's gained a little bit of extra strength from just an additional 2 more days. So every day from here on out, hopefully your starter will gain in strength. And I think tomorrow I will go ahead and I'll test my starter again and see how it's doing as far as how long it takes to peak. And peaking means how high up in the jar it will go before it starts to fall down. And so far this one has peaked at 4 hours. So what I'm really hoping for is that this starter will gain in strength and be a 6-hour starter so that it can do the longer fermentations. So hopefully maybe by today it will peak at 5 hours, maybe tomorrow, or maybe by day 13 or 14 it will peak at around 6 hours, but I don't know. We'll just wait and see what happens. So from here on out, it's mainly feeding it every day. I'm still feeding it twice a day, and I discard all but about 30 grams of starter, and then I feed about 60 grams of flour and 60 grams of water, and I'll continue to do that every day as the starter gains strength. So let's go ahead and feed the starter. I'm going to pour out all but about 60 grams. Nope, I said that wrong. All but 30 grams. So there I've got about 30 grams. This starter was very nice and bubbly this morning. Hopefully you saw that when I held it up. And it has a really nice yeasty smell to it. It also smelt a little bit sharp this morning because it needed to be fed. So I will tear out the scale and add 60 grams of water. And if you accidentally go over just a little bit, that's fine. Like if you put in 61 or 62 grams of water, just go ahead and put in the same amount of flour and you'll still have 100% hydration. So let me tear that out. That's 60 grams of water, and I'm using this flour mixture here, 50% all-purpose flour and 50% white whole wheat flour. So I'll put in 60 grams of the flour. Okay, I just got a little too much in there, so I'm going to take a little bit out. There we go. Now I'll give that a vigorous stir. So there we go, we fed our starter. I'll be putting the lid back on it and putting it back at room temperature, 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius, or pretty close to that. It doesn't have to be exact. So today I'll be wiping off these marks, and I think tomorrow I might go ahead and test the starter again to see how it's doing. At this point, if you wanted to try making bread, you could, but I would recommend making a formula that has a shorter bulk ferment, one around 4 to 5 hours. I wouldn't do a long fermented sourdough. So I might even put a formula out tomorrow to help you with that. So check tomorrow or the next day, and I'll put a formula out with a shorter bulk ferment for testing our new starter. So the other thing I was going to do this morning was show you how to prepare a starter for freezing. So if you are going on vacation or you're going to be gone for a while, or you want a backup starter, you might want to freeze it. And now a frozen starter will last, from 3 months to 6 months. It might even last a year. But your freezer has an auto defrost. Well, most freezers do. And if it does, then your freezer will be constantly cycling with warm temperature and then freezing temperature again. And so that will shorten the life of the starter and how long it can last in the freezer. But it will last several months frozen. And so you might want to do that if you're going to take a break from making sourdough for a while. Can you believe that anyone would want to do that? Or you're going on vacation and you aren't going to be baking for a while. So you can also do what I'm going to show you, you can also do and put in the refrigerator. It will extend the life of your starter for quite a long time in the refrigerator as well. So I'm going to take a bowl here, and I'm going to take some of the starter discard, but I wouldn't recommend that for doing this. What I recommend is feeding your starter and then waiting about 4 to 6 hours when it gets nice and bubbly and active. And then what you would do is take some of your active starter, not discard. I'm just using discard to show you because it's handy here. But use some active starter that has been fed within 6 to 8 hours or 4 hours, just so that it's nice and bubbly. Put some in a bowl or a container. Add just a little bit of water, and then start adding flour. And it doesn't matter as far as exact amounts. You don't have to worry about that. What you're going to be doing is making a very low hydration dough piece. So I don't really want to be mixing it on my scale. Let me use the top of my flour here. Okay, I'm going to get my hands in there. Okay, so you keep working it. It's starting to come together as a dough ball. Let's see if I can show you better this way. Now I've got a really nice thick dough ball. I'll try to get a little bit more flour in there. I think that's pretty good. Okay, we've got a real low hydration, thick piece of dough. Make sure you get all the flour incorporated. And there you have it, a nice thick piece of dough. So what I would do at this point was I would take a freezer bag, I would mark it with the date and put sourdough starter on it. Well, wait a minute, before that, what I would do, forgot this stage. I'd take a piece of plastic wrap and I would wrap the sourdough dough so that it's more tightly wrapped and can't get air around it. That'll prevent, when you get freezer burn. You don't want it to get freezer burn. Then I would drop it in a freezer bag. and zip it tight. And you can put it in the freezer just like this, or in the refrigerator. It will last quite a long time either way, because the lower the hydration, the longer it will live. The wetter the hydration, the faster it ferments. So the other thing I would do to help it last just a little bit longer is put it in a nice airtight container and seal it, and then pop it in your freezer, and it should last quite a long time. To reconstitute it, you would thaw it when you're ready for it, and you would break off some and disperse it in some water, and then start feeding it again. And it should bounce back pretty quickly. And the less time it's been frozen, the faster it will, the faster it will kick back again. So the longer it's frozen, the more of the microorganisms and yeast are killed by freezing. So this is ideal for, a short term, 3 to 6 months. Longer term, it's not as good. So like I said, this also will last really well in the refrigerator. So if you just want to put it like this and put it in the refrigerator, you'll have a backup, and it will also bounce back really quick. It won't take very long, just a day or two of feeding, and it'll bounce right back. So that's pretty much all for today. I'm so excited that we're on day 10 and that our starters are nice and active and bubbly. If you're still having a problem, then like I mentioned yesterday, you really need to be switching out your water or your flour to see what's going on, because by day 9 and 10 your starter really should be active, and if it's not, you need to change something. So that's all for today. I'm going to check and see if there's any questions, and if we have some questions, I'll see if I can answer them. And tomorrow I will be testing the starter again, and we'll see if it's gaining. I can tell that it is, though, because this morning it was up higher in the jar, which means it lasted longer when it was fermenting from being fed. Okay, so let me go to the top here. Tony, what brand of scales do you use? Okay, everyone that knows me knows that I absolutely love the KD 8000. You can get it on Amazon for, it's usually around 35 to 40 bucks. I recommend getting the adapter with it so that you don't have to switch out on batteries. But the batteries do last quite a while, especially if you reprogram it so that it doesn't auto turn off and you turn it off whenever you're ready. Well, the auto turn off probably actually does save on batteries, but I've had, before I learned to program them, I had it where I was actually measuring and it turned off in the middle of a measure, and I learned to reprogram it, and I put a video of how to reprogram it on YouTube. So if you put KD 8000 in a search on YouTube, you can find how to reprogram it so that it doesn't auto turn off. So the KD 8000 baker scale is what I recommend, and it's what I love to use. I've used them for years. Leatrice says, my starter is very bubbly, however mine looks waterier than yours. Not so thick. Mine is in a plastic container like what your flour is in, and the bubbles are getting to the top. Well, are you, Leatrice, are you weighing your water and your flour? Because it would be, it's pretty essential to weigh it if you want it to look the same as mine. However, the other thing is your flour is different than mine, and it's not going to absorb the same amount of water as my flour will. So it's probably your flour, and there's a difference in what yours is doing for absorbing. If your starter is bubbly and active, I wouldn't worry about it. If it's at 100% hydration, the equal weight of flour and water, then it should be fine. So continue to feed it, and if it's a little thinner, more of the bubbles might escape so that it doesn't look quite as bubbly. But that doesn't mean it's not active. I used to keep a 166% starter, which was very wet, and it's the same volume of flour and water, which means a lot more water. And you wouldn't hardly see any bubbles, but it made some great bread and was very active. The more watery the starter is, the more the bubbles can escape, so you can't always see how bubbly your starter, might be if all the bubbles hadn't escaped. So if the only problem you're having is that it's waterier, then, or more watery, go ahead and continue to feed it and take care of it, and then you'll see if it's working when we start making bread. Sarthak says, how do you travel abroad with your starter? I mean, in which form of starter? Does the custom guys at the airport have trouble with it, like confiscating it, doubting it to be some funny white powder? Yeah, I've had that problem before. What I do is I will take dried starter and I mark it carefully and put it in a bag, and it says sourdough starter on it, and I've never had any trouble. I've also taken the dough pieces like I've made with this. I've taken real small pieces of the dough, and people just think it's a piece of food, so it's not really a problem. I just zip bag it and throw it in my carry-on. So I've done small pieces of dough and the dried starter, and I haven't had any trouble, but I would definitely mark that it is sourdough starter, just in case you get asked. Okay, let's see. Phantom 357. Hi, these videos are great. A great resource. So thank you. What ratio would you use for the least sour loaf? Well, if you're looking for a sour bread, then you need to join my course making San Francisco sourdough bread. Because after 13 years of experimenting and trying and following the the standard wisdom of making sour bread, I broke away and followed my instincts, and I can make a really nicely tangy sour loaf now. So that's not really part of our series on making a sourdough starter, but if you're interested in a real sour loaf, take my San Francisco sourdough class on Udemy. Mary Beth H. Maybe travel. You could pre-ship your starter so it does not have to go through the same rigors we do at the airport. That is an excellent idea, Mary Beth. Mary Beth suggested that you send your starter ahead of time in the mail so that it doesn't have to go through the airport. However, if you're going overseas, it can get caught up in customs, and so you might travel to where you need to go and your starter might not be available when you get there. So you could try both ways. Or courier it. Someone recommended a courier. Sherry says, I only had winter red wheat berries at the time we started the sourdough starter. I have ordered the hard white wheat berries. Mine looks great. Sherry, any of the wheat berries is fine. We're feeding our starter, so it's not as critical to have the hard or soft. I prefer the hard wheat berries. The red berries are slightly more bitter and have a stronger flavor, and so and some people really like that. A lot more people tend to like the milder flavor of the hard white wheat berries. So either one will do, though. You don't have to have the white wheat berries to make a starter. The red wheat berries will work just fine. I'm glad your starter's looking great. Gothav says, hi Teresa, greetings from Athens, Greece. If a starter peaks at 6 hours, does this mean we can bulk proof for 6 hours before shaping and final proofing, or should we split times if we fold? Yeah, you can. If you need 6 hours, that's fine. A 6-hour peaking starter means that you can work with the more standard formulas. It's never exact, though. Sourdough is not an exact science. If you cool down your dough, you could bulk ferment longer. If your dough is warmer or you have warmer temperatures to deal with, you may only be able to get away with a 3 or 4 hour bulk ferment. What a 6 hour or an 8 hour starter will do is give you more options. So, and it all has to do with experimenting. Like I said, it's not an exact science, and if you have cooler temperatures, things will take a little bit longer and give you more time. If you have warmer temperatures, everything is sped up. So, but definitely you could bulk ferment for 6 hours if you needed to. There's been some times with my regular starter that I usually use, it's a 6 hour starter, and there's been times when I've taken it the full 6 hours. I think I tend to shorten it a bit to maybe 4.5 to 5 hours usually, because I like to save a little bit of extra oomph for the final proof. You definitely need to bulk ferment long enough though to get the qualities in your dough that show you that your dough is done being fermented, and we'll talk about that later. Sherry says, what kind of wheat berries are used for all-purpose flour? How is it ground? Can we do it ourselves? To make an all-purpose flour, they will take a softer wheat and a harder wheat, and blend them. And of course, white flour is made by ultra sifting. They will sift as much of the bran and the particles out that they can to make it as white as possible, and also to make it as fine as possible. So if you want to try to come up with something similar, you could blend a hard and a soft wheat and then go through sifting. I've sifted some of my flour. About 15% of the flour is bran. So if you take out the bran and you still have some of the rest of the particles which give nice flavor and color, some which is tends to be the ashy components, it makes a really nice bread. So you might want to try doing that. Experimentation, it's the fun. That's where the fun is. Okay, Gothav says the dough for hours, that leaves us 2 hours before shaping, or the whole procedure from mixing to final proofing should take place in these 6 hours. How do we manage the time? 6 hours, generally we're talking about the bulk ferment. So if you have a 6 hour peaking starter, then you're working with 6 hours for your bulk ferment. Like I said, that's real variable. You can change that. I've taken some of my doughs and I've extended them over 3 days, 4 days, a week. In my extreme fermentation course, we extend the bulk ferment for a very long time. We start with cold water and keep the dough in the refrigerator. But the 6 hour proofing basically means, it kind of correlates with the bulk ferment. After the bulk ferment, you will be, the dough, will be shaped, and it will basically start raising all over again. So, and then you definitely don't want your final proof to be 6 hours, because you'll have a flat brick. Even with commercial yeast, they will take 2 to 3 hours for the first proof, and then the second proof or the second fermentation takes about half the time or even less. Okay, let's see. Jessie says, I'm using bread flour and whole wheat. I hope that's okay. That's perfectly fine, Jessie. Bread flour and whole wheat is a great combination. If you only have white flour, you can just use that. If you only have whole wheat flour, you can just use that. I'm doing a hybrid starter with white and whole wheat because the whole grains have a lot more microorganisms, and it's a little easier to be successful making a starter if you use part whole grain. I'm using white because the whole grains, if you use only a whole grain, they tend to be just a little bit more difficult for a newbie to handle. The starter is thicker, and then when you start using it, using a lot of whole grains is more challenging. So I'm doing a hybrid starter to make it easier for newbies. Okay, Leatrice says, yes, I weigh both exactly. Great, that's what you want to do. Tony, I signed up for the sourdough program yesterday. Okay, great. So you'll be learning how to make really nice, tangy sourdough. Sherry says, thanks so much. I love the class. Well, thank you, Sherry. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm really enjoying this too. Gothav says, thank you for all the valuable information. All the best. Same to you. I'm glad that you're enjoying this event. Thank you. Okay, so I'm getting a bunch of thank yous. Well, I've been really having a lot of fun, everybody, and thank you for showing up and asking questions. That helps everyone else who comes after and watches this. So when you've got great questions, and I hope that your starters are doing really good and that they're nice and vigorous. So over the next few days, we'll be testing the starters, and then we'll be baking bread. So I hope everyone's looking forward to that, and you're having a lot of fun. So I guess I'll see you again tomorrow. And if you have any pictures of your sourdough starter, you can post them on Perfect Sourdough on Facebook, and I'll take a look. Maybe we'll all take a look. So we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.